He thought he could spin the narrative until Karoline Leavitt turned the tables with his own words, live on air. The studio lights blazed, cameras rolled, and the tension was thick. A packed audience, millions watching from their screens, and two figures seated across from each other, both waiting for the first move. Karoline sat poised, her expression unreadable. Across from her, liberal reporter David Langford adjusted his tie, clearing his throat with forced confidence. Karoline, let's be honest. The American people deserve the truth. Trump keeps misleading this country. Just last week, he claimed the economy was stronger under his presidency. But under Biden, unemployment is down, wages are up. Isn't it time we stop pretending Trump's policies weren't a disaster? A flicker of amusement crossed Karoline's face. I was waiting for this. She let the silence stretch just long enough, then responded, her tone firm. David, let's not rewrite history. You're telling Americans things are better under Biden? Let's talk facts instead of feelings. She turned to the camera, knowing this moment would spread across social media. Under Trump, gas averaged $2.77 per gallon. Under Biden, Americans struggled to pay over $4. Inflation under Trump? Less than 2%. Under Biden, it peaked over 9%. And let's not forget, David cut in, sharper now. That's misleading. Inflation is a global issue, and Trump played a role in the downturn Biden inherited. Karoline didn't flinch. She lifted a single sheet of paper. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, December 2020, right before Biden took office. Inflation, 1.4%. That's stability. January 22 under Biden, 7.5%. And Trump's policies were the problem? David exhaled, shifting. He was recalibrating. Before he could speak, Karoline pressed on. And since you brought up unemployment, Biden's team brags about today's numbers, but ignores context. Under Trump before COVID, unemployment hit a 50-year low, 3.5%. When the pandemic struck, it spiked. That was global, not policy failure. Yet Trump led the fastest economic recovery in modern history. Biden inherited an economy already rebounding. He didn't fix anything. He just took credit for the rebound that was already happening. David let out a short laugh, shaking his head. Karoline, you're twisting the narrative. And let's not forget, Trump is facing multiple legal battles. Do you really think the American people should trust a man with so much controversy? Karoline tilted her head slightly, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. David, I have a question for you. You called Trump untrustworthy, but how do you explain this? She reached under the table, clicked the remote, and a video appeared on the studio screen. The color drained from David's face. David Langford's own voice filled the studio, taken from an interview months ago. If we're being objective, Trump's economic policies did lead to historic job growth and increased wages. You may not like his style, but you can't argue with the numbers. The irony hit like a freight train. The same reporter who had just attacked Trump's economy was now confronted with his own words' undeniable proof that he once admitted the opposite. Karoline let the silence linger. She didn't need to say anything. The audience was already filling in the blanks. David blinked, then forced a chuckle. Karoline, you're taking that out of context. That was during a different time. She leaned in. Different time, David? You said that just 8 months ago. If facts change that quickly for you, maybe the audience should question what else you conveniently forget. David's hands curled slightly on the desk. He was a media veteran, used to controlling the narrative. But this was different. The power had shifted. The real problem, she continued, isn't that you got it wrong before. It's that you pretend you never said it. That's the problem with mainstream media. You rewrite history in real time and expect people not to notice. But they do, David. They notice. David forced a tight smile. If we're talking about honesty, let's talk about Trump's behavior. He incited chaos, refused to accept election results, and is facing multiple indictments. Are we supposed to ignore all of that? Karoline exhaled. Let's be clear. Trump questioned the 2020 election. So did Hillary Clinton in 2016. So did Stacey Abrams in Georgia. The difference? When Democrats do it, it's protecting democracy. When Republicans do it, it's a threat to democracy. The studio audience murmured. And as for the indictments, Karoline continued, we've seen this before. Political lawfare is nothing new. But let's pretend for a second that Trump is as guilty as you claim. Are you ready to hold Biden to the same standard? Because I've got a list of alleged corruption scandals involving his family that you conveniently never bring up. David scoffed. Conspiracy theories. Karoline raised a brow. Oh, so now it's the anything that makes my side look bad as a conspiracy theory routine. That's cute. But let's be real. David, this isn't about truth. It's about control. The media decides what's worth covering and what's worth burying. You're not informing people. You're managing them. David opened his mouth to respond, but he was out of time. Karoline wasn't done yet. David Langford was drowning, and everyone could see it. The confidence he walked in with had been chipped away, piece by piece, until only frustration remained. He knew the cameras were on him. Every expression, every nervous glance would be dissected online within minutes. But Karoline wasn't backing off. She leaned in, her voice calm but unshakable. Let's try something simple. David, yes or no, did you or did you not say that Trump's economic policies led to historic job growth? David exhaled sharply. Look, I already explained. Yes or no? Karoline pressed. David hesitated. Yes, but thank you. She nodded. Now, if that was true 8 months ago, what exactly changed? Did the facts suddenly rewrite themselves? Or did you just decide they were no longer convenient? David's face hardened. He knew he was being backed into a corner, and he hated it. You're oversimplifying things, Karoline. Context matters. Karoline smirked. Oh, I agree. So let's add some more context. She pulled out a folder and slid a printed transcript across the table. This is a list of every time you've shifted your stance depending on who was in office. In 2019, you wrote that rising wages and record low unemployment prove the economy is thriving. That was under Trump. In 2022, under Biden, you said, unemployment numbers don't tell the full story. Wages aren't keeping up with inflation. You flipped your position, David. Not because the economy changed, but because the person in charge changed. David's lips pressed into a thin line. He knew he couldn't refute something he had written himself. You don't report the news, Karoline continued, her tone sharp but steady. You shape it. When facts don't fit the narrative you're selling, you twist them. That's not journalism. That's propaganda. The studio fell silent. David's jaw clenched. He tried to gather himself, but the damage was done. Karoline sat back in her chair, exhaling as if this entire exchange had been nothing. David still wouldn't admit he was wrong, not once. Because this wasn't about truth. It was about control. About making sure people believed what they were supposed to believe, no matter how many times the story had to be rewritten. David Langford had nothing left, no retort, no defense. No pivot that could save him. And the world was watching. He sat frozen, his usual smooth rhetoric abandoned in the wreckage of the interview. The air in the studio was thick, not with tension, but with the undeniable weight of exposure. There was nowhere to go, no rehearsed pivot, no crafted talking point that could erase what had just happened. And Karoline knew it. She didn't gloat. She didn't have to. The moment spoke for itself. The moderator, who had remained unusually quiet, finally cleared his throat, desperate to regain control. Wow, that was certainly a lively debate, he said with a forced chuckle. But no one laughed. The damage had already spread beyond the studio. Social media erupted. David Langford Exposed was trending within minutes. Clips flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The most damning moment, the exact second David realized he had no way out, was replayed thousands of times. Slow-motion edits, brutal captions. Watch this man's soul leave his body. Even legacy media outlets struggled to spin it. Some tried, claiming Karoline had ambushed him or that the clip was out of context. But the full interview was everywhere. No amount of damage control could bury the truth this time. Then came the worst part for David, his own colleagues. A well-known analyst from a competing network posted, "This is why trust in the media is at an all-time low. We have to be better." A former producer from David's own show tweeted cryptically, "Some people care more about narratives than truth." It was only a matter of time. David's silence in the aftermath was deafening. No statement, no explanation. Because what could he say? He had been caught exposed by his own words. And yet, Karoline wasn't done. She sat back in her chair, exhaling as if this whole exchange had been nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Because for her, it was just the beginning. Then Karoline delivered the finishing touch. "David, I'll be fair. Maybe this was just a mistake. Maybe you didn't mean to contradict yourself. Maybe you truly believe you're giving people the truth." She shrugged slightly. But here's the problem. When mistakes always seem to favor one side, when the truth always shifts depending on who's in office, that's not journalism. That's activism. David opened his mouth, unsure whether to argue or retreat. But Karoline wasn't finished. "You claim to care about democracy, but democracy requires an informed public. What you're doing, what so many in the media do, isn't informing. It's managing perception. You don't give people the full story. You give them just enough to shape their opinions the way you want." She let the weight of it settle before leaning forward, locking eyes with him. "So tell me, David, if you had the power to decide what the American people believe, would you ever admit when you're wrong, or would you just keep rewriting the story until they forgot the truth?" The words hung like a blade in the air. David's face twitched. He needed to respond, but what could he say? His credibility had been shredded in front of millions. The moderator, sensing the interview was beyond saving, scrambled for an exit. "All right, we'll have to leave it there." But Karoline wasn't done. "One last thing," she interjected smoothly, her tone lighter now. "To everyone watching at home, this is why independent thinking matters, why questioning narratives matters. Because when the media picks and chooses which truths to tell, it's not just bias, it's manipulation." David Langford sat silent, exposed and humiliated. The interview ended, but the impact had just begun. The second the cameras cut, David yanked off his earpiece and avoided Karoline's gaze. Outside, chaos erupted. By the time Karoline stepped out, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Notifications flooded in. Hashtags like #Karoline exposes media trended worldwide. David's own network stayed silent, no segment, no defense. The damage was done. And the most brutal indicator, David didn't tweet. For a man who built his career on crafting narratives, his silence spoke louder than words. By the end of the week, whispers began circulating in media circles. Is Langford done? Producers started reconsidering his contract renewal. He might take a temporary leave to let things cool off. No official statement came. No attempts to recover from the humiliation. Because really, how do you recover from something like that? Meanwhile, Karoline wasn't just trending, she was booked. More networks reached out for interviews, podcast invites poured in. Even those who didn't always agree with her couldn't ignore what she had done. The lesson was clear. People were tired. Tired of media manipulation, tired of double standards, tired of being told what to think only for the narrative to shift when it was convenient. Karoline hadn't just won a debate. She had exposed a system. As Karoline sat in her car, watching the headlines flood in, she smiled, not because of a personal victory, but because of what it represented. People weren't just listening. They were questioning. And in a world where narratives are controlled, asking the right questions is the most powerful thing you can do. If you believe in truth over spin, facts over feelings, don't just sit back and watch. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and most importantly, stay engaged. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because this is just the beginning.